Welcome back to episode number 45 of the Phillies Fan Podcast. I'm your host, Jaden Harper. The trade deadline has come and gone for Major League Baseball. The Phillies with 2 Major League trades on deadline day. So I'm going to break them down right now, but make sure, before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss when I upload any content. We're going to have a lot more coming out this week. Throughout the week, breaking down the deadline and then getting ready for the sprint that is August and September in baseball. So let's get started with what the Phillies did at this year's deadline. 2 major league trades and 2 more minor trades. The major league trades with the San Francisco Giants and New York Mets. The first one with the Giants, getting Luis Arias and Caleb Killian for Ramon Vasquez and Marty Gare. And then with the Mets, they get Brooks Raley, a left-handed reliever, for Luke Gavardish and John Spikerman. Those are the 2 major league trades. Minor league-wise, they traded Seth Johnson right at the end of the deadline to Sacramento for Colby Thomas, and they also traded Nolan Hoffman, who was DFA'd today, for Emmanuel Colon and cash. They also DFA'd Lou Trevino and Peyton Henry. So a busy day for the Phillies. Didn't do anything before deadline day. And they, honestly, I would say to a point, scrambled. The Arias deal is a very good deal for the Phillies. You look at what they needed coming into the deadline. He fits none of them, but he is a hitter. He's a contact guy. The Phillies are in the bottom tier in baseball when it comes to contact, so they need a guy like Luis Arias when it comes to at the top of the order. Lets them move things around. He's going to report to the team on Tuesday, probably either debut tomorrow or Wednesday, but it'll be very interesting to see how the Phillies can incorporate Luis Arias into their everyday lineup. They're going to have to move around the infield. Harper's moving back to the outfield. Alec Boba's going to play first base. Bryson Stott's going to play third base. But I just think, in general, they get Caleb Killian, who's a good reliever, but, the stats aren't great. Under the hood, stats are better. But you look at the control is the biggest upside with Killian, and then with Brooks Raley, really good pitcher. But when you look at what the Phillies needed, it doesn't feel like they hit any of their main needs going into this deadline. I think everybody considered the Phillies' main needs to be getting a back-end starter, getting a right-handed outfielder, getting a right-handed reliever, getting a left-handed reliever. You only completed one of those by getting Brooks Raley. That's the thing where it's like, is this a disappointing deadline? Which I would say it is. I don't think the Phillies did enough when you look at what San Diego did, when you look at what Chicago did, when you look at even what Atlanta, and you could obviously the Dodgers, what all 4 of those teams did, even Milwaukee, they got made some nice moves on deadline day, but what the Phillies didn't really get to the level of those teams. Luis Arias is a great get, but he wasn't necessarily a need. And if you even get Luis Arias, there's ways to make the team better than what the Phillies did. I think they made a mistake not trading Alec Bohm today at the deadline, considering he is a free agent at the end of the season, and the Phillies should not be bringing him back this offseason. So I think it is a mistake by the Phillies not moving on from him. I think that would have really helped the team because you probably could have gotten a back-end starter, a better reliever, a better outfielder for him, but now you have to move 33-year-old Bryce Harper back to the outfield, a position he really hasn't played since 2021. So for the Phillies, I just think it's a really big mistake, a really disappointing deadline, a lot of missed opportunities for the Phillies. The players they got were good, but just not what the Phillies needed right now. It's just not at all what the Phillies needed. There is a lot more work to be done on this team. The bullpen looks a lot better. You have a guy like Alex McFarland, who had a great debut with the Phillies. They sent him down. He had a great July in the minors with AAA and AA. So you look at a guy like him, I would think he's going to be added onto the roster at some point. You look at all the other positions, though, the Phillies just did not do enough to put themselves in a position to be like, okay, yeah, we'll be in a good position. You're going to have to, are you going to platoon a guy like Bryson Stott at third base? Don Mattingly earlier said no, but you already platooned him at second, so what's the difference with platooning him at third? Also, the Phillies are very left-handed heavy, which can be an issue going into the postseason. When you look at the teams they're going to have to face, You look at a team like the Cubs, they have, a guy like David Peterson now with Matthew Boyd, Ashota Imanaga. All three of them are really good left-handed pitchers. You look at Atlanta, they have Chris Sale, one of the best lefties in baseball. You look at the Dodgers, what they just got. Tarek Skubal, one of the best lefties in baseball. Justin Robleski's having an incredible season. Blake Snell is dominant in the postseason. They have three really good lefties, and they also had Chris Bubich at this year's deadline. So you're just looking at 4 really good lefties on the Dodgers. Even if you get that far, you have a team like Milwaukee. You have a guy like Kyle Harrison who dominated the Phillies earlier this season, and he's a really, really good lefty. You look at what San Diego did. They go out and get Robbie Ray, who's a really good left-handed pitcher. So you just look at all of the things that the Phillies, I would say, missed out on at this year's deadline. And now you look at the other teams, and it's like, ooh, it doesn't look that good for the Phillies. But again, I would say there's a lot of time left in the season for the Phillies to turn things around. When it comes to their recent play, hasn't been great. Big series against Baltimore this past weekend, but again, it hasn't looked great recently. Miami was a horrible series. The Yankees wasn't a good series. The Dodgers wasn't a good series, and the Mets wasn't a good series either. So it hasn't been any good series really in the second half for the Phillies. They're struggling right now as I'm recording this against the Nationals. So the questions have to be asked about this team. They didn't do enough at the deadline. Can this team realistically win a World Series? And the answer, I think, is no. But that's why we play the games, to see what happens. If the season was based off paper, A, the Dodgers would probably be the World Series champions, and B, the Mets would be the NL East champions, and they were probably one of the biggest sellers at this year's deadline. They're in the basement of the division. That's why we don't play baseball on paper. That's why we actually play the games. So we'll see what happens with the rest of the Philly season. But that's going to wrap up this short, quote-unquote, emergency pod after the deadline. Watch out for the rest of the week. Later tonight or early tomorrow morning, you'll see for the whole league on Around the Bases the recap of the deadline. A lot to be said, a lot of big moves today around Major League Baseball. On Wednesday, you'll see me and my good friend Ian Copey will be breaking down in entirety the Phillies deadline in a deeper fashion than I did right now. And then later this week, we'll be back again with another Phillies fan podcast after the Washington series before the Phillies get ready to take on the Toronto Blue Jays this weekend. But thank you for watching episode number 45. I'm Jaden Harper, and I'll see you in the next one.